Warren Clark. I go to Bridgewater State University. I'm a computer science major. I'm 20 years old. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Emma Hartle. I'm 18 and a senior at Boston Collegiate Charter School. Ariella?
Hi, I'm Ariella. I'm 16 and I'm a junior at the John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie. I am with the Boston Community Action Team, gang. I go to school at UMass Boston, majoring in business management, and I'm 20.
News came out about Marty Walsh's nomination for Secretary of Labor and that Kim Janey would become the interim mayor. Were you guys initially confused by the situation, or did you see general confusion in your surroundings? Like, did people understand what was actually happening?
Personally, I think the media platforms didn't do a good enough job of portraying what was actually going on. It was misleading that she was the mayor, everything was dandy, everything was good, and it didn't really give like a background as to what was actually going on.
Yeah, I agree. Like a lot of the posts that were on Instagram was just like me at Boston's new mayor, Janie, like first Black woman elected. But then when I went and I was like, oh, like Mom, Kim Janey's the new mayor. She was like, what? How? Like there was no election. Like we didn't vote in anything. And then I was confused too, because I thought I was just like, not into all the media that was happening. But it was just really misleading, like Warren said.
Yeah, I think also like there's a lot of complexity to this political process, like any political process in Boston. I just feel like I need a Politics for Dummies book. That would be really easy for me to read. But a lot of people were talking about the special election and a lot of people were against it. A lot of people were for it. And I'm like all in the background, like, hold up, what is a special election in the first place? And then how does that tie into Kim Janey and, Mayor Walsh being promoted? So there was a lot going on. And I feel like there were a lot of misleading posts and articles and a lot of misinformation and miseducation being spread everywhere. So I'm glad that you asked that question.
Yeah, and initially it wasn't even like, they didn't even say what had happened with Marty, like that he was elected to be a part of the new cabinet. It was just like, here's your new mayor. And I was like, so did Marty step down? Like, what's happening? There was no information on that.
Yeah, definitely a bridge in the news that it just didn't fall over well. But that takes us into our next portion where I wanted to talk about what are your thoughts on the decision to bypass a special election? And where enough of Boston residents represented in this discussion? So as youth, what do you guys think? Like, what do we think?
I think that we should not have a special election. And there was a lot of uproar and controversy around that, which is why the city council actually held a testimony for the community to speak upon that. And I actually was one of the young people who spoke on behalf of, gang votes and, the work that we do, because our job is literally civic engagement. Our job is to go to the polls. Our job is to get people registered to vote. So we need to be in the loop when it comes to anything like this that's happening. And the reason why I say I don't agree with having a special election is because who's going to be out there, getting more people registered to vote for this special election? One, I feel like we are essential workers, but we're not seen as essential workers, but we're on the ground doing this work in the midst of a pandemic, doing face-to-face contact. Of course, we have face masks on. We're still following, precautionary measures, but at the same time, we are in the middle of a pandemic and we're going face-to-face. Who's going to be doing the work on that ground? And usually, by default, it always ends up being young people that does the quote-unquote labor work or the hard work on the ground. So I think like that, to have a special election so soon, one, our community is not prepared for it, like let alone that we just got out of a presidential election and we saw how that went. But yeah, I think it'd be inconsiderate to the people who do this work on the ground. And it doesn't have to be physically, but also virtually is just as tedious too.
Yeah, I think that Carrie brought up some really good points. Like, especially for adults who are on the meetings that she mentioned, it was kind of like community organized to talk about the special election. It's like they want to be the main voice in the conversation, but then kind of bypass everything. Like, we as BCAT are doing a lot of work. Like, who is going to go out there and say you should go and vote for this special election? Like, in addition, that means asking our community to go out and vote for like 4 times in the next year. And I think that that's really hard to do, and it's really hard to get the numbers. Like, in the conversation, it was all about preserving and increasing the Black vote, making sure that we get Black voters out there. But then you just see some contradiction, because like they were saying, oh, well, we should have the special election, but we want more like Black voters to be there. So I think just there wasn't really consensus in the meeting, which obviously that's usually what happens. Like, in a meeting, everyone's not supposed to agree or say the same things, but it was kind of frustrating. I don't think that we should be having a special election, especially because I mean, I personally like Kim Janey. If it's just for a couple of months, definitely the city council can step in, like making sure that city councilors understand their powers within our community and the things that they can do, and just uplifting our voice will sort of like mitigate maybe having someone that some people don't want to have in office. But like completely striking that out or saying that we need to have a special election just doesn't really sit well with me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that 4 elections in 6 months will naturally result in inequities in voting, and that's just not something that's necessary. Um, and also, I know that you guys attended the hearings, so like as young people, what was that atmosphere like? Did the points made like mostly resonate with you, or were there things that really stood out to you that you feel like need to be resolved or anything like that?
Yeah, I can speak as someone who was a part of who attended that hearing. I think one, I was struggling with, I want to say, imposter syndrome as a young person, because there was not enough young people in that conversation. It was all adults. I believe me and somebody else were the only youth representatives in that conversation, and that was disappointing, because I thought that, more youth voice would come to the table, or more, some adults would at least bring some youth voices to the table, because I feel like within a youth and adult partnerships, the role of an adult is to support the platform of the youth, right? Or give them access to those conversations. And I didn't see a lot of young people in that conversation, but I'm glad that we were there. um Other than that, I would have wished, but a lot of people did resonate with me, because a lot of people did not agree with the fact of having a special election as well. So I thought that was really good. At least the community, it seemed like the community had come to a consensus on that. um but I think what was dope was, like, the good part of it was there were a lot of organizations that were speaking, but it wasn't like only Boston. It was like downtown or Chinatown, and different demographics of Boston speaking upon the special election, which is good, because this is a collective effort.
Yeah, I think Carrie brings up a good point. Like, when we're having community organizing, or when we're having community meetings, what is the role of the adult in relation to the youth? Like, I personally believe that it's to support, right? Because especially in the meeting, they were saying, the youth are going to take over. We hear this a lot. The youth are going to take over. They're supposed to follow in our footsteps. They're supposed to create good for the future. But then what efforts are you putting in as an individual in our community to make sure that that's ensured, to actually uplift the voice of the youth? I definitely felt like I was sort of on the outside of the meeting. In the first meeting, I know Carrie went to the second one, so she can probably speak on that. But in the first meeting, it was sort of 4 elders or 4 older people talking and just going back and forth with each other. Like, if y'all wanted to just talk and have that sort of thing, you could have done it on your own time. But like, this was all very last minute, which is why I think there weren't a lot of youth there, or there weren't like certain amount of community organizers. But again, this keeps on happening. A youth asks a question, right? A question that a lot of adults are also asking, and their automatic response is, oh, a youth is speaking. Like, good for you. Like, you can speak, you can say what you would like, but then like you never consider how that might contribute to the conversation. A lot of the questions weren't actually being answered, and that was frustrating for me.
Yeah, and let me hop in because I think you brought up a good point. I feel like a lot of adults over romanticize the participation of just youth voice, like just them being there. But are you following up with them after that conversation? Are you asking them, hey, how can I support you beyond this meeting? Or how can I show up as an adult, right? I feel like a lot of adults unconsciously love to use youth voices as a means of tokenism, where they love to invite our voices onto their panels, and they give themselves a pat on the back, like, yay, you guys see that I included youth in my panel. But in reality, you failed to follow up with those youth. You failed to, promise whatever, which goes back to this whole concept of false promises, right? And why a lot of youth don't trust adults. So, yeah, but a lot of it was like, let's find any young person that we can get. We don't care where they're from. Like, we don't care if they know about this or if they have any knowledge. We just want a young person at the table so we can say that we invited young people to the conversation.
Oh my gosh.
Problematic.
It's so problematic. You invite a youth who like has some things to say about the issue, but then you have youth in the chat asking questions or contributing. You never look there, right? You never want the whole body of the youth to speak. You only want a certain person that might contribute to your goals or to the main frame of what you're trying to promote. And it's sad. There's so many times when like after the event, there's follow-up emails, right? Like a youth will send an email to an organization or to an adult that's supposed to be supporting them, and then there's no response. Or the response is, I appreciate you being there. It was so great. I hope you continue on with the rest of your day. Like, how are we continuing a positive cycle by doing that? Like, that's why we have so many meetings, but like no real outcome sometimes.
It's definitely one of the things I noticed. Like, instead of a diverse thought process and like spread of ideas, it's just, okay, you agree with me, all right, I'll kind of shuffle you in over here. All right, you don't agree, okay, that's cool, blah 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 blah. They'll go about their day and everything. I find that just to be inexcusable, to be honest. But I want to shift into our next question. Do you believe that the media or local government purposely misrepresents information like this about the mayor election, about things going on in our community?
Most definitely, yeah. And I'm gonna pass it off to Princess because Princess brought up a good point one day about linguistics and how that plays a role. So go on, take it away, girl, because you about to see what I think.
Oh, okay. What I was going to say is I think that it's okay, maybe this is not good to say for a podcast because it's my personal opinion. I think the job of the government is to keep the oppressed in oppressive places, right? Making sure that Black people aren't informed are trends that we've been seeing since like chattel slavery. And that's just a continuance in smaller and other microaggressions. Like a lot of news like places were just saying, oh, look, we have a new mayor and she's a Black woman. But then you don't answer any of the confusion in the communities, right? You don't do anything to uplift everyone. It's just kind of this fact is presented. And I think that misinformation, or because Kim Janey wasn't even mayor at that point, right? Like she wasn't. That misinformation is used in order to confuse coalitions in the Black community and like to keep us separated. That's my personal opinion.
I agree with that. It's pumped the news they want to hear into their ears. Oh, it sounds so good, but what about spreading the information that's not readily available to the average person? It's things like that that go unnoticed and unfortunately are still continuing to happen in the community.
I agree, Warren, like how do you simplify the information? Because I feel like linguistics is a huge part of it that we don't talk about. And they purposefully perpetuate these narratives to keep us feeling like we're satisfied, when in reality, no, we shouldn't be satisfied with the fact that you guys told us that we had a black mayor and you guys didn't tell us about what a special election was. Like, we shouldn't be satisfied. That's that symbolic justice that can sometimes be problematic to our community. And I also think that misinforming the community, or especially Black communities, is a form of voter suppression. Because especially when I went to go cast my vote at the ballot, I had to go run around and call like 3 different offices in City Hall because they told me that my vote was not counted, even though it was counted, because I had witnesses and people from the BCAT team that came to vote with me. So they witnessed me voting, but there was some confusion in the offices, and my vote wasn't counted. So it was a whole lot of chaos, right? And this is like they like to put us through the ringer in order to just get basic information. And it is a form of voter suppression, and I think that they do it on purpose, which is why there are organizations and coalitions like BCAT, where our job is to educate the community, but creatively educate the community in a way where other people and the common folk will understand.
Does Emma want to step in and add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that I absolutely agree. I think that it's purposefully made to be difficult to decipher, by the average person, by somebody who's done a lot of research. Like, I have looked into the special election and the information about it during doing research, and like, there's so many different stories here and there. And also, if you look at the wording of like article titles and stuff, like that's why in January I really thought that we just had a new mayor, let alone knowing about the special election, like, and then even then it's like, Carrie and Ariella, like, you guys went to those hearings, and even within those hearings there were kind of like hierarchies that silenced you in a way. So even if you are in the know, it's very difficult to have your voice. And that like makes me really question like the ways that you guys feel, sorry, I don't know how to word this, but like, do you really feel like involved in this special election decision? Because the city council did vote to bypass it, but it still needs to be approved. Like, do you feel represented by city council members, especially because all of the people running for mayor are, city council members right now, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah.
I find it hard to find representation in people that won't even have a conversation with me. That's just how I feel personally. But yeah.
I think that there's 2 main points to this. The first is a lot of city councilors preach this, people need to be close to the power, right? People in our communities need to be close to the power. But then you never give us opportunities to actually put our voices in there. Like, I understand that the whole meeting about the special election was kind of last minute, but there should have been more youth there. There should have been more adults with new conversations. I noticed that there were 2 city councilors there, and I think that there should have been more, especially in regards to this. Second thing is, there was a lot of clash happening with city councilors that should not have been a part of the city, a part of the special election conversation. Like, even in the meetings, there was bickering. There was references to city councilors in disputes. Carrie mentioned to us that there was stuff on Facebook between 2 city councilors. And it's like, y'all can do this on your own time. How does that put the people closer to the power? Especially if it's about personal use, or how you maybe felt like, here's how I feel. I think that there were other city councilors that wanted that spot. That's how I feel about the special election, and some of the conversations that were happening around there. And you can feel however you would like about that. But when you're putting your personal preferences in front of the communities, that's when we start to have problems. And I think that should always be considered, especially because it's the people in the community who got you in the space that you are now, right? And so I think just proper representation is crucial in times like this.
And that's why we always preach accountability for people in those type of roles. You know, we've seen it from the top tier. Our president, he always let his personal life affect what he was actually doing. That's a different conversation. We're not going to go there.
I'll follow up with what Princess just said. I think, I will be honest, personally, Julia Mejia was one of the first people who reached out to me because they were like, yo, she was like, there's no young people in this conversation. Like, can you bring your folks? Like, but the problem is, I don't think she needs to be the only city councilor. Why is like she the most, prevalent one that's always reaching out to me when it comes to, the politics in Boston and wanting to involve young people. I think that, there should be definitely more city councilors, because how many city councilors are there? There's like a whole group. There's a whole list. That whole list should be reaching out to us, not just one all the time.
If you all can go and sit at a table and figure out if we should bypass a special election or not, you guys can be at the meetings for all the information that we provide about the special election.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Especially because they're always preaching about how, they care so much about engaging the community. And it's just like, this is an essential time to be engaged with the community. So, and then it's like they'll vote on that and say that they were influenced by the community, but it's like, where were you? Like, it's just weird. And I think that it needs to be like carefully looked at right now, especially when the 3 people running for mayor are city council members. And one of them did vote not to bypass the election, while the other, Andrea Campbell and Michelle Wu, voted, I think, to bypass it. But
that's why there was so much disputes on Facebook.
Yeah, I think it's just so unprofessional and just a waste of time to be getting into feuds on like Facebook right now, and especially with the time crunch, which is another thing that might be not personal, that might be like purposeful, is that it is so rushed, this process. Like, I know that we didn't anticipate that this nomination would come at this time or whatever, but it's just putting people in a bad position.
And the amount of pressure that the community had to apply, like, you don't know how many Facebook statuses that I saw of people asking, so when is the hearing? When is the hearing? Like, we shouldn't have to apply that much pressure just to request a hearing. Like, if you know that it's a community concern and you see that there's a dispute about it everywhere, then like you should take the initiative as an elected official to automatically schedule that hearing if you see that's what the community is in need of. So yeah, go ahead, Princess.
Yeah. I'll jump off of what Carrie said and what Emma said. Like, I think because now we have representation for people of color, we should be seeing major differences, right? If we had to apply pressure to the last people who were in the role, I think the community is expecting, well, maybe they'll start to lift these things up if they're seeing that we're asking questions about it on different social media outlets and just in general. And I think that that's important. And I think that it's good to see the difference of when we put people who are actually supposed to represent our communities. And Emma mentioned how, like, right now it's essential. Like, we're going to think back to what happened during COVID, right? What happened during the pandemic, all of the policy and disputes that arose during this time period. And if we have representatives and council members who aren't actually addressing those things, these are the things that we're going to remember. It's not about whether, you knew such and such from this community, or, oh, you live here, like I knew your auntie, all of that, because that's a lot of the rhetoric that we see in conversations. And they just use that in order to bypass a more important conversation that we need to be having. But it's about, like, what did y'all doing during COVID? Like, you guys know that there's a bunch of people who won't be able to get out to have 4 elections. What are you doing to meet those people's needs? What are you doing in order to make sure that the people are closer to the power? And if those questions can't be answered, we're just noticing more flaws that, that are happening within our government.
If elected, how do you think each candidate or the winning candidate would present themselves in their, endeavors in their career? Like, what does that look like? Similar to what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, are you asking whether you think like how they'll back mistakes that they've made, or like how they'll play out their roles?
So we've seen them now. We've seen, okay, Michelle Wu, Andrea Campbell. Like, will they kind of feed into what everyone wants, or will they, okay, I'm going to stick to what I've been doing this whole time?
Mm.
Will they go on?
I
Oh,
Yeah, I think that like personally, I've seen that a lot of the candidates are genuine in what they're doing. Like for instance, there's this app called Politicking that has bases all around the country, but it's not like a Boston base, right? And they were doing interviews there. Like I just follow like different outlets, and I was seeing them on there, like Andrea Campbell and Michelle Wu. I think that I don't know how much I've seen Ricardo Arroyo, but we did get an opportunity to like sort of interview him with Java with Jimmy. I think that they'll follow up on certain things. Again, it's hard to do everything that you would like to do, but I think we can definitely see their passion, especially in the pandemic, like passing those like orders or those different bumps that you have because we're not able to see each other. I think that's something that they've all been trying to do, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, another thing that I also appreciate is I see a lot of them, I guess, like showing up for a lot of conversations. Like I've seen them on Java with Jimmy, which is like a popular community, I guess, like resource that a lot of people have been tuning into lately. And I think like it just needs to be a whole conversation about accountability. Like instead of endorsing people right now, our community needs to be strategically organizing and creating those conversations for accountability. What are you going to do for the city of Boston? And then with that also come, because we have to think solution orientated, right? What are the problems, but what are also the solutions? And are you going to support the solutions that we present to you? If we say we want rent control, if we say that we want, more counselors and no police officers in our school system, like literally I feel like as a community, because the work that we do is all about accountability, so we also have to hold ourselves accountable as well as a community. And what I think what we should be doing right now, instead of just endorsing everybody or endorsing people, is like, let's get together a debate or a panel or to see where their mind is at. What are the demands that they're going to have set out for Boston? You know, and also to ask those hard questions, like, do you support rent control? Yes or no? Like that's all we need to know. We don't need to run around, right?
It is really that simple. Like transparency would solve so many issues. Just answer the question. When we were on Java with Jimmy, not only were people going way over time, right, to sort of try to make circles and get out of answering questions, but it was a lot of them were simple yes or no questions. And if so, how would you make these things happen? I think that an event around accountability or just like general platform will be good, because there's been so many popping up, but I don't think that there's been one with all of the candidates who are running so far. That would be really good. I think that we should organize to do something like that. And I think that here we should have people pointing out, okay, you're saying that you want to do this, but a couple of years ago, these are the actions that you were taking. Have them answer the question and then show the steps that they've been taking to actually get there and make progress. Because you can use your words, right? You can say a lot with words, but actions are required in order to get jobs done, in order to create responsibility and all the things that we're preaching and asking for. So I think that that's really important.
Yes, an accountability track record.
Agreed. Also, I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, the way that someone acts as a candidate is not the same when they're actually voted into office. So, like, making sure that they're actually productive, even if they have a plan, getting things done in a timely manner, continuing to engage with the community is so important. And often, like you said, like on Java with Jimmy, we kind of see that a lot of these candidates kind of just stick to the same story whenever they're asked similar questions. And they kind of just avoid questions to begin with. And I think that that's kind of just disappointing, especially like we were talking about us being young people, like, you know, being in a conversation, but not really. And then also having to witness people that are going to be your leaders, you know, not really playing up to their role as they should. So I guess that's another question I have, is that like, how do you feel that, like, how do you just feel about the elections coming up, like in November, like the mayoral election, city council elections? Like, do you feel energized about it? Do you feel excited, or are you just kind of in like a critical lens about it at the moment?
I'm in like both I guess I'm in the middle. A critical, I'm looking at it from a critical lens, but also an optimistic lens as well, because I feel like if we can really, like I say all the time, if we can really strategically organize as a community in the right way, we can really seize this opportunity. Like this will be, this is a critical moment right now in history for the city of Boston. Like if we make the wrong turn, if we don't pay attention, if we don't hop on it now, then literally for years to come, is going to have detrimental impacts on our future, on our young people, especially on the Black and Brown community. Um, so I think this can be an opportunity for us to really organize and really come together and really, let's have those hard conversations now so that we're not having those hard conversations later, after the aftermath. So also placing people, that align with our values as a community as well, because just because you want to run for the city of for mayor does not mean that you're aligned or you're in tune with the values and the morals, because morality does play a huge part of politics that a lot of people forget. And right now we're not seeing a lot of morality. Right now we're seeing a lot of ego being inflicted upon each other on Facebook and disputes. So I think this can be an opportunity to seize the moment, so that we can have a positive impact for, generations and years to come for Boston. But if we don't hop on this, it's gonna, boy, oh boy, we're gonna have a lot of fixing up to do past the fixing up we already got to do right now.
Yeah. Where have you been and what have you been doing? That is an important question that we have to ask everyone when running, whether that's mayor or for city councilor. I think that I am coming at this from a critical lens just because I've been swept under a lot of the weather of the pandemic. It's hard, right? You want to trust your gut when voting for someone or for advocating for someone outside of BCAT, right? But when we're not really able to engage with them because of the pandemic, it's like, is this just what I'm seeing online because there's a lot of support for this person, or do they actually align with my goals or with my morals, as Carrie was saying? And so I don't know if I come at this from an optimistic view. I am happy, for instance, everyone who's running for city councilor at large or just city councilors, we have a large range, right? Someone's running, they're 18 years old. Someone's running and they were, managing the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club, right? These are people that we can connect to. And I think that that's great. But I think back to what Carrie was saying, the ego is really just encroaching on all of this. I'm just like, I kind of want to separate myself from this for a bit because I don't have the time. Like, to be honest, I don't want to hear about, how you're arguing with this person unless it actually does have something to do with like policy and accountability, right? The arguments that we're having aren't usually based on that. It's usually based on something else, which makes me feel a little iffy, but that's how I choose to answer that question.
Me, I'm personally optimistic about this. I see this as a huge opportunity. You mentioned the portion of seeing this as or seeing the candidates online and how it might skew how they actually are. I kind of agree with that. So you kind of shifted me over a little bit to the critical side, but I'll bounce back. What I wanted to say about that is, we see them type all these things and, we might make a certain, judgment towards that. But the actions speak louder than the words at the end of the day, and I feel like you can get a good feel for if they're right or not. Um, so I'm more optimistic about this. Great opportunity. Yeah.
I feel like we could encourage, it is a big opportunity, right? If we elect people, we can make history, we can do great things. But where I'm seeing it right now, it's kind of like, ooh, I don't even know where it's going. Like, it's just, yeah, we need I think we as BCAT can do additional things to make sure that we as an organization are steering the election in a good way, or just to a progressive way in which the community is able to be engaged.
Yes, and that just made me think like we also have to ask ourselves as a community, how are we going to organize this? How are we going to do this? Because I feel like a lot of people are just operating in their own little isolated silos. There's like 10 different conversations happening about the mayoral race, but it's all about the mayoral race. But why does it have to be like, oh, I want more my organization's name to be on the front of this. Join our conversation on the mayoral race. There's like 5 different flyers talking about the same topic. Like a lot of this is just people operating in their own isolated silos when really we should be working collectively together
Sure.
as a community. Like I shouldn't have to be invited to 5 different conversations that's about the same thing. Why don't we all just come together,
Yeah,
That's what we're
here's
doing.
how I see it. Like, because of everything that's happened in the past, we're sort of adjusting into how we can operate as a community. Like, people of color, we're used to being separated. We're used to having to compete. And now that we have an opportunity in which we need to work together and can work together, it's kind of like, ooh, how do we do this? How do we get adjusted to this? I think organizations want to say, we hosted an event on the mayoral election. This is why we should get funding. But then you're not actually connecting it back to the mayoral election, right? Because you can elect a counselor or a mayor who will make sure that you get the funding that you need in order to actually have youth engaged in this, or in order to have these conversations. So rather than having it steered in a more competitive or maybe individualistic lens, see how you can pour back into your community so the things that you need are actually provided for. And so that's something that we just need to work on. And I think that that's something that we can do.
Yeah, I feel like because there's so much confusion, especially with the special election, that there is definitely increased tension right now about this election that will happen. That's kind of blurring the information and making people kind of separate themselves in that manner. But yeah, I agree. I think that what we need to do and what we need to do with all of Boston is have a call to action, have action steps. What policies do we want, and be loud about it, because otherwise, what are we doing, So I think that that's something that, whoever is viewing this or whoever wants to be involved in the conversation, we should really discuss is what policies do we want, and also holding people accountable to those policies once they do get elected. So that's definitely something that we can discuss in the future.
Yeah, I think that a good model was we had the youth justice rally today, in which people sort of contextualized the bills that we're supporting, the hostility towards menstruation and the experiences that they face with that. Another person talked about housing. And then that sort of set the table for, okay, because of this, these are the bills that we want to support. And here are the lined out actions that we can take in order to make sure that they're put in place and what they're going to look like. And I think in order to look at those bills, we do need support from counselors, right? It's about, again, what Carrie was saying in the beginning. What roles do adults have in connection to youth? And then how can we all work together? And that includes all of our counselors and our mayors.
And also includes our community as well. I agree with you, Princess, and I agree with you, Emma and more. So let's hopefully make this vision a reality, Hopefully for anybody that's watching that truly wants to get involved, I really hope that you do reach out to us, and that, you know, we can form an authentic connection so that we can, you know, collaborate in the future and actually get this work done. Because, you know, we can't just be talking about this. If we have another Zoom call, or if we're talking about the same thing by 3 Zoom calls in, then we're not really doing the work.
Yeah, and I think how we can sort of, I know Emma and Warren are going to wrap it up, but like, we're going to make sure that BCAT is also taking those steps, that we are making sure that our community is engaged. I think that this conversation was really good at contextualizing everything that's happening, because you do have to like regroup. You do have to think about what's going on in order to make good steps. But yeah, BCAT will make sure that our community is engaged. That's a nice pledge that we take.
And I love this conversation because 1, we talked about good ideas. 2, we laid out the groundwork, so we have a plan. 3, it's only a matter of time to get it done.
I think the worst things first. Introspective with my thoughts, got all my worst things first. Disconnected from myself, I need perspective.